Hi guys, Tiffany here from Tiffany Gordon Cosplay with a sewing cosplay tutorial for how I made my Android 18 jacket from the anime Dragon Ball. And here are some of the reference images that I used from the show for the front and the back of the jacket. And if you'd like to use the blueprint that I used for making this jacket, I have it available on my website, www.tiffanygordoncosplay.com, or see the link below. To first start off making this jacket, you're gonna need a blue jean denim fabric, and I got this from Joann's. And after I got the fabric out, I laid it so it was doubled up and pinned all of my pattern pieces onto this. This will be so you can cut out 2 pieces at a time rather than 1. And after all the pieces are pinned, I then went back with a rotary tool and some scissors to cut out each of the pieces. The first pieces that we're going to be using for creating the jacket are going to be for the back jacket, which is letter F from my blueprint, as well as the side part of the jacket, which is letter G. And then I pinned each of the pieces so the seams aligned, having the darker denim face inward toward each side. Next, we're gonna sew. For this, you're going to need a jean or denim sewing machine needle, as well as specific jean or denim thread. This thread will be a little bit thicker than normal thread for sewing, and you'll probably want an extra spool because it goes through really fast. And to start off sewing, I ended up using a straight stitch with our needle on the left side. As a side note, you should remove your sewing pins out of the fabric before having your needle go over them. This will prevent your needle from getting damaged or bending a sewing pin or even breaking a needle. And afterwards, used an overcast stitch so that way I could make my seam nice and pretty and have no fray edges. Once I was done with sewing, I then folded the seam on the inside facing inward to the center of the jacket, and then pinned it flat in place. And then went back to the sewing machine and did a straight stitch, and this time had our needle on the right. This stitch that we're doing is going to be more of a decorative stitch, as well as it's going to hold your seam on the inside so it is flat. Now that the sides are attached to the bottom part of the jacket on the back, we're going to attach the top part of the jacket on the back, which is letter E, and we're going to pin it in place together. And then once again did a straight stitch, as well as having our needle on the left. And then went back with an overcast stitch along the seam. For doing this next decorative stitch, we're going to fold the seam so it must be facing upward towards the top half of the jacket and pinned it flat in place. And then went back with a straight stitch, with this time our needle on the right side. And here's what the back of the jacket looks like so far. The next piece that we're going to be using is letter D from my blueprint, which is the back top part of the jacket. And we're going to start off by pinning all of the edge of the fabric so it is faced towards the back side. And then sew all of this flat using a straight stitch and our needle on the right. Once your crescent-like shape is done being sewn, you're going to pin it to the top part of the jacket, starting in the center and working outward towards the edges. This way it will lay as flat as possible. And back to the sewing machine we go with another straight stitch and the needle on the right side. Now to work on the logo part of the jacket. I first started off with a red fabric and pinned my pattern in place, which is letter K from the blueprint, and cut out using scissors and a rotary tool. I then, with a pair of scissors, went along each of the corners and cut out a square shape, as well as in the very center did 2 little slits. This is going to make it a lot easier for you to fold over the edges to the back, as well as not have so much bulky fabric at the corners for sewing. And afterwards, then pinned each of them in place. And for sewing this piece, I ended up using a universal sewing machine needle, as well as red thread to match the fabric, and sewed the edges with a straight stitch and our needle on the right. Now for the R pieces of the back jacket. For this, they are letter L on the blueprint, and I ended up pinning the pattern to white fabric this time and cut out with a pair of scissors. And the white fabric that I used ended up being a little bit more fray-like on the edges, so to prevent this from happening more, I went around all of the edges with Fray Check. This is going to glue all of your edges so the fabric will no longer fray. And once the Fray Check was dry on the R's, I then pinned them onto the red piece of the jacket. And sewed in place with a straight stitch and the needle on the right. And this time the thread that I used was white. This is just going to be a tacking down stitch for us. I then went back with a zigzag stitch along all of the edges. This is going to give you a embroidery-like look to the R's. Now that the logo part of the jacket is done, we should attach it to the actual jacket! For this, I started in the very center of both the back jacket as well as the logo, pinning along all of the edges. And using red thread, I then sewed the piece to the jacket with a straight stitch and our needle on the right. And here is what the front and the back of the jacket looks like once this piece is sewn in place. Now for the front part of the jacket. We're going to be starting with letter B from my blueprint. This one is the only piece that you're going to be cutting out 4 of. And we're going to start by putting the 2 sections together with the dark denim part facing inward toward each other. And we're going to pin along the outside edge, leaving the long straight side open. And then sewed it with a straight stitch and our needle on the left. I will note that we went back to our jean sewing machine needle as well as our denim jean thread. And next, went back with scissors, trimming the corners as close to the thread stitching as possible. This is going to make it, when we flip this piece inside out, have nice crisp corners. And now that we flipped it inside out, we're going to go around all of the edges and pin them flat. And for this, you will also be pinning all the way around the entire piece. And then back to the sewing machine, for this time using a straight stitch and the needle on the right. At this point, your 2 front panel pieces should be completely sewn all the way around. I next taped it to the table, this way the fabric would not move, and then did a piece of masking tape straight down. This way I could use it as a guideline for doing a decorative stitch, and I mirrored this onto the other side of the front jacket. And then used a straight stitch and the needle on the left, using the masking tape as a guide and making sure not to sew over it so you don't get adhesive on your needle. And once that is done being sewn, remove the masking tape, and we're going to attach this front panel we just sewn, which was B, to the front side part of the jacket, which is letter C. And sewed the 2 pieces together with a straight stitch and our needle on the left. You want to make sure that your line is going to be a little bit past your already sewn line, and then going over the seam with an overcast stitch as well. The next part is going to be doing another decorative stitch, and this one we're going to need to fold our seam so it is facing towards the sleeve part of the jacket. and pin it flat. And for this stitch, we're going to be using another straight stitch and our needle on the right. And here's what the front jacket looks like so far on the front and the back side. Now, to attach the front jacket to the back jacket. Of course, pin the two pieces in place, and then we're gonna go back to the sewing machine and we're going to use a straight stitch with the needle on the left, and then we're going to go back on the edges with our overcasting stitch to lock all of them in place. And next was some more decorative stitching, and we're going to start with the shoulder parts, having the seam face towards your back, pinning it in place, sewing each of these with a straight stitch and our needle on the right side. Now for the waistband. This will be letter J from the blueprint. For this, I started by folding all of our edges and pinning them in place, and sewing with a straight stitch and our needle on the right. Next, we're gonna fold the piece hot dog style with the dark denim side facing outward, pinning along the fold. And then sewed along the fold with a straight stitch and our needle on the right. This is gonna make our waist part nice and crisp and flat, rather than having it wavy around the base. And once that's done, we're going to pin the waistband along the bottom part of the jacket. And sewed it in place using a straight stitch and our needle on the right. I will note that the starting off for sewing this part might be a little bit more tricky, just because there's a lot more fabric that the needle is going through, so be patient and you'll get through it. Now to talk about the pockets. These pieces are letter H and letter I on the blueprint, and for both of these pieces I folded in half, having the dark denim facing outward and pinned along the seam. And then used a straight stitch with our needle on the right. This is going to be a decorative stitch for the pockets. And next went around all of the edges of the pocket and trimmed a corner out. This again is going to fit so we can fold our seams over, and as well as not have bulky corners for sewing. And then pinned our seams flat. And for sewing these pieces, I used a straight stitch and our needle on the right. One difference though, for the pocket's top part, I did not fold the top half. I ended up going with a overcasting stitch along the edge instead. And here's what the pocket pieces should look like so far. Next, I took the bottom part of the jacket and pinned it to the spot on the jacket I wanted the pockets to go. And because I want this to be a functioning pocket, I did not pin down the top half. If you would like this to just be a decorative one, you can go ahead and pin all of the sides. And then sewed around all of the edges using a straight stitch and the needle on the right, remembering to leave the top half unsewn so you can have your functioning pocket. For the top part of the pocket, I aligned it with the bottom part of the pocket, leaving about a half an inch in between each of the pieces, pinning the top half upside down at the very bottom. And then sewed it in place using a straight stitch and our needle on the left. Next, I folded the top flap of the pocket down, so all the dark denim should be facing you now, and pinned along the seam. And sewed along the seam using a straight stitch, and this time our needle on the right. This extra stitch will make it so your pocket flap will always face downward rather than upward if the snap is not done. Now for the collar. This is letter A from my blueprint. For this, you're going to want to put both of the pieces facing towards each other with the dark denim, pinning along the edges, leaving the bottom part, which is the shortest part, unpinned. And then sewed it with a straight stitch and our needle on the left. And again, I trimmed the corners and flipped the collar inside out, pinning along all of the seams after I was done so they would lay flat. And once again, sewing along the seam using a straight stitch and our needle on the right side. And once that was done, I then sewed using an overcasting stitch along the bottom half, so that way our two pieces would become officially one full closed piece. Now that the collar was done, it was time to attach it to the jacket. I did this by pinning it to the back side of the jacket, so it was overlapping. And then sewed the collar to the jacket, again using an overcasting stitch, and I did this stitch twice for extra support. And dun 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 dun, the sewing part of our jacket is complete. But wait, there's more! Now we're gonna add snaps to our jacket. The snaps that I used are from Tandy Leather, and snaps are traditionally for leather materials, but they work perfect for blue jean materials as well. And you'll need 1 pack of their snap kit, which comes with 4 different components to your snap, as well as you're going to need a hammer, as well as you'll need your snap specific anvil and your snap specific punches. I first started off by marking with a black Sharpie where each of my snaps were gonna go, which was 4 for the center snaps, as well as mirroring them to the opposite side, and then 1 snap on each of the pockets, and that'll be 1 for the pocket flap as well as 1 for the actual pocket. Next, with a pair of really sharp scissors, I then snipped a tiny little hole in each of the marks, and then inserted the male part of the top half of the snap into the hole, and then on the opposite side of the fabric placed the female part around it. I then used my snap specific anvil, placing the head in the circle that fit with it, and hammered it in place using the snap punches. I repeated this for each of the top parts of the snaps on the jacket. For the bottom half, it's pretty much the same process where you'll insert the bottom male part into the hole and put the female part on top. And then place your snap specific anvil upside down so the holes are facing down, and using the snap punches, hammer in place once again. And once that's done, you have functioning snaps for your jacket, and it's really cool. And that was the last step to making your Android 18 jacket. Yay! I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, press the like button and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you for our next cosplay tutorial. Bye guys!